If someone were to ask me what 3 primaries for soldier require the most skill to use effectively, I would say the Beggar's Bazooka, Airstrike, and the Rocket Jumper. Though out of these 3, the Airstrike is probably the easier one to understand for new players who want to use it. But even for players who are very familiar with it, it's not really used that often because the benefits have to pile on top of each other in order for it to reach its full potential. And probably the hardest thing to do when using the airstrike is staying alive because unlike the rocket launcher, it's a lot harder to get your first kill or really any kill if you don't know what it does. So in this video I'm going to go over what it does and how I think it should be used by new players if this is their first time using it. So first things first, the airstrike has a 15% blast damage reduction from rocket jumps, it has an increased attack speed and smaller blast radius while blast jumping, its clip size increases on kill, it has a 15% damage penalty, and a 10% explosion radius reduction. Now if we take a look at the damage, the base damage for the airstrike is 76, the maximum ramp up is 96, and the maximum fall off is 40. Getting a crit with this will give you 230 damage while a mini crit does between 103 and 129. If we compare these stats to something like the Liberty Launcher, we can see that although the airstrike does do more damage per rocket, it does not do more damage in total. For the Liberty Launcher, if we multiply the base damage of 76 by 4, we get a total of 304 damage, while for the Liberty Launcher, if we multiply the base damage of 68 by 5, we get 340 damage. Although this may not seem like a big issue for the airstrike, seeing how you can carry more rockets in it than the Liberty Launcher, it does become an issue when you realize how significant that blast radius has been reduced. And I'm not just talking about that 10% reduction, but also when rocket jumping, your blast radius will get smaller by 0.5 meters. For visual reference, it would look something like this. It has the second smallest blast radius of all rocket launchers, the first being the direct hit of course. But it's also important to know that when you rocket jump, your rockets are not going in a straight line, and more specifically, your accuracy is going to get worse the farther you are from your target. So what's the best course of action when using the airstrike? Well, there are 2 options. The first of course is using it with the buff banner because your firepower can easily increase if you have more than 4 or 5 rockets. The second option is a lot more obvious and is using the base jumper because not only do you have a bigger chance of firing off all of your rockets, but you might also be more accurate when you rocket jump. But between these 2 secondaries and in my personal opinion, I think the base jumper is a better option overall. Don't get me wrong, the buff banner can be a very useful secondary, however, it really only shines when you have more than 5 or 6 rockets. And there's also the issue with the blast radius, so not only do you have to aim more accurately, but rocket jumping would require more skill than usual. And with that said, I can really only recommend the buff banner to players who are more experienced in rocket jumping. On the other hand, although the base jumper does require some skill or practice to get the hang of, it's a lot more rewarding in the end. However, one thing that should be made clear is that it is very important to know your surroundings when using this, because not only are you an easier target when you're in midair, but there's a likely chance that an enemy can get behind you before you even touch the ground. And believe me, nothing's more frustrating than a spy waiting to backstab you as soon as you release your parachute. All I can say is as long as your teammates are doing an occasional spy check, this shouldn't be happening often. But besides that, when using the base jumper, one bad habit that everyone should try to avoid is firing off all of their rockets from a far distance. The worst case scenario to happen is that you don't kill anyone and you're left defenseless. Although you may have softened them up for your teammates to deal, now the enemy is aware of what you're trying to do, which means they'll try to kill you first before you can build up your rocket supply. So it's generally a good idea to be close to your teammates such as a medic to have a higher chance of living. In this clip, the enemy was pushing the cart and I thought it was a good idea to fire off all of my rockets in hopes of getting a kill. And although it may have seemed like my rockets were going in a straight line, they seemed to only be going towards the cart instead of the players, resulting in very minimum damage. Heck, I tried doing it again and surprisingly I got 1 kill from it. So this almost seems like a combination of both skill and luck. For skill it's obvious, but for luck it's really about having the enemy at low health to begin with. And although this could be said for any other weapon in the game, the airstrike is one of the few that desperately needs this. Similar to the Beggar's Bazooka, there's not really knowing where your rockets will be going and you can only hope that your enemy will be caught by at least one of them. Of course the airstrike will give you this opportunity a lot more frequently as long as you were good at using it to begin with. But with that said, I still think the airstrike can be a really fun and good weapon weapon to use. I don't think its intended purpose was to get the most amount of kills, but rather do the most amount of damage to a group of enemies. Similar to the Liberty Launcher, but done much more differently and arguably maybe even a bit better. Regardless, the airstrike does a good job at lowering enemies' health and making sure that they don't advance as quickly. If there's one thing for certain, you do not want to be caught in the open where a soldier and his airstrike can easily surround you with a volley of rockets. So that's pretty much all I wanted to say about the airstrike. I apologize if this video wasn't very useful to people who were already familiar with the airstrike and wanted to learn something new about it. Whenever I make these types of videos, I try to focus on both the good and bad from my own experience when using these weapons. So sometimes I may have a few things to complain about, while other times I may have only one thing to complain about. But regardless, I hope you enjoyed this video and I'll try to make more of these in the future. Anyways, have a good day.